setting, I am the least educated, I am the least experienced, and I am the least probably proven talent in the management team.
Ritesh Agarwal, founder and CEO of Oyo Rooms.
His story is the stuff that legends are made of.
Definitely one of the biggest success stories in that travel and tourism.
So a company that was growing triple-digit percentages year on year, overnight, the company lost 70% of its revenues.
After we did the Shark Tank episode, I got 2 or 3 lengthy emails saying that, Oyo has taken all my money, they have not returned our money, we're not able to cope up.
Some newspapers actually at the slightest hint that there was any challenge would actually write a news story about it as an outcome saying Oyo Pakka is going to not exist.
Paul Graham said that you should do things that don't scale.
My view is similar, but probably slightly unique to our business or what I have learned over the years. Founder-driven companies end up creating more value than only professional-driven companies. Education and formal university should not be seen as the same thing.
When did Peter Thiel Fellowship happen? Did this happen after you started Oravel or before?
Well, I think I'll tell you the long story.
Before we move ahead, I want to quickly thank our partners of today's episode, and that is universityliving.com. People, did you know 6.4 million students go abroad each year and they face one major and expensive problem, which is housing. Uniliving isn't just another accommodation provider, but it's a community-based, content-led, tech-enabled, global student housing managed marketplace. From sorting out your accommodation to your university fees to rental payments all the way to booking your air tickets, they have everything from start to end. It's an ultimate study abroad buddy. With a diverse range of options like private apartments, purpose-built student accommodation and homestays, Uniliving caters to every student's unique needs and preferences. All the properties are 100% safe and verified by University Living, which ensures a secure environment for students to live and study. With their user-friendly platform, you can find your dream accommodation in just a few clicks. Plus, their advanced AI tools like the cost of living calculator and study abroad buddy will help you plan your budget and will help you get personalized guidance. So if this sounds interesting to you, check the link in the description and get 10% off on their services.
Hi Ritesh. This podcast is very special for me. Why? Because like I told you, I started following you 7 years back when I saw you deliver a talk at IIM. So during that time, I never thought I'll become an entrepreneur, but the aspiration that I had is, if at all I become successful, one day I should be able to talk like this guy. So it's a very big deal, and during that time I would have never thought that I would meet you in my house. So thank you so much for coming. It means a lot.
No, Ganesh, first off, thank you for having me here. You may remember we first met at the sidelines of Shark Tank, and I remember thinking that you have substantial amount of detail. And you also mentioned that you had made case studies. So after that, I've been watching those case studies and it is incredible the level of detail that you go into. So I would actually say that you speak probably in a manner that now I aspire to speak as clearly as you do than the other way around. But thank you for having me and thanks for the great khana. I'd love coming back here as much as I can because of the great food.
You're most welcome, man. Thank you so much. Ritesh, a lot of people know you as the founder of Oyo. And after doing 2 to 3 podcasts, what I realized is that the entrepreneur is known for his successful venture, but he's actually a result of the learnings that he has acquired from the failed ventures. And when I did my research, I found that you were selling SIM cards to earn money. Why were you selling SIM cards?
Look, I talked about it recently in Nikhil's podcast, but today I'll use this opportunity to go far deeper into this. We are a family of 4 siblings. I'm the youngest of the lot. The elder 3 are sort of Asian parents' dream. Engineers, 2 of them went to business school, got good jobs, married in time. So every tick mark that you can imagine. I was always a little bit of the rebel you may consider with or without a cause. So I always wanted to try and do something new. So when I was in my 3rd or 4th grade, I saw that there was probably the first computer that came to school. And there was a lot of enthusiasm around it. only students above 6th or 7th grade were allowed to use it. So my life's mission became, how can I sort of get access to it sooner? So I would reach out to the computer teacher who had nothing to do with me, and I would say, "Ki mujhe sikha do. Like, can I learn a little bit? Can I do something about helping you to do your job?" And eventually, as life would have it, I learned some basic programming. I was able to get access to the computer lab sooner. So I was constantly, this kid was trying to do something new, something different. And you'll always find them in a classroom. In a classroom, there will always be those few kids who are constantly thinking, "Mujhe kuch alag karna hai, I have to do something different." I was always that kid. Now, I heard the word entrepreneurship for the first time when I was also still in my 3rd or 4th grade. Between me and my eldest sister, there's probably almost 8 years or a higher age difference, 8 years roughly. So मैं शायद 3rd या 4th grade में होऊंगा, and she had just got into her +2. So in Odisha, a lot of students go to the +2 format of education, not the 11th and 12th grade equivalent. So she goes to her +2, and then they have an event, which is an entrepreneurship event. So she's back from her college, and she says, "We have an entrepreneurship event." I had never heard about this word. So I go figure out the dictionary and I read about the word. I remember hazily, it said, entrepreneurs are people who solve problems and create a business around it. I thought, ye theek hai, this is what I want to become. Not because what it meant was interesting, just because it was something new. And then sort of came this perspective of SIM card, right? So telecom was in its rapid growth phase in India. The only telecom service provider available, maybe before the early 2000s in places like Odisha, was BSNL. There used to be a BSNL telephone exchange. People would go there, receive SIM cards, things like those. Very expensive to use. I think Airtel was one of those challenger companies which was just getting started. It was a startup at that point of time, which was wanting to disrupt the broader telecom arena by making it easy to get SIM cards in the hands of people or telephones in the hand of people, making it cheaper for them, and while making sure that the experience is of high quality. So let me give some examples of what that period was like. So around the time when I started selling SIM cards, for every month of validity, you needed to spend 200 rupees of recharge time. Okay. So just for a validity. That's when they launched a program called Airtel Lifetime Prepaid, where they said, now you have lifetime prepaid, right? So zindagi bhar ke liye you can continue. So you need to only buy talk time. You don't need to buy any more validity. Weirdly, when I started OYO again, I thought that the 999 program worked very well for me when I sold SIM cards. So OYO started at 999.
Okay, what do you mean 999?
Price of the
price.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you remember back in the day when OYO had started, our advertisements used to be you get a clean, comfortable room starting at 999.
Oh, so Airtel was also selling these SIM cards at a lifetime prepaid cost of 999.
Correct.
Okay.
Then I'll give you another example. You'd see a lot of little stores have the red signages of Airtel, right? Red color backlit signages. I used to sit on the back of little vans and take these signages to install them on the shops who I was selling SIM cards to. That inspired me to sort of, when I was starting OYO, now when you drive around India, it's impossible to miss an OYO signage. That inspired me to put the red OYO signages on our hotels. So while it may seem like it was just a 2-year summer holidays thing of SIM cards, it left a lasting impact on me and my decisions over a period in my lifetime. I started doing this in my 6th grade during summer school, summer holidays, partly because there was nothing much to do and I was this rebel who wanted to try and do everything new I could. Telecom was new, telecom was exciting. It was the closest that any business in a town like Raigada, where I come from, came to having any access to technology. So I thought, kuch naya hai, I want to do something about it, and I enjoyed every part of it. And I think I can go on probably for an hour about how experiences there have changed my life. But I think if I have to summarize them, understanding the small business owner in India, I think would not have happened if not for my Airtel stint. Because if you see global telecom companies, they mostly distribute using their own retail stores, right? So you will see AT&T stores, Sprint stores, and so on. India is probably one of those rare markets, I would say, Indian companies have then gone and replicated this in Africa, where the distribution is not through their own retail stores. It's through the kirana shops, the telecom stores. Now, of course, internet is also adding in, but still a large part of the distribution still happens through, general trade, where kirana stores, small telephone shops are the ones retailing out SIM cards, mobile phones, and so on. And I think my time period of selling SIM cards for Airtel taught me this.
How much money did you make out of it?
Well, I don't remember, but what I do remember is the first time I made a 2,000 rupee income by selling a few SIM cards. I came and gave to my mom and I said, this is my first income. As you know, you're naive and innocent, and my mom still has it with her.
Really?
She still has that 2,000 rupees. I was
Wow.
recently, we were moving houses, and mom was moving something, and in one of them she pulled out and she showed the same 2,000 rupees that she has from back then. So I think, like the first earning is special, as you can imagine. Similarly, at OYO, our first client, I've been searching her for my lifetime. I've still not found her. There was this client who came in. They were performing at a Gurgaon event center, and this was a group of artists, and they spent 70,000 rupees to book 3 nights, take over the full hotel. I still have the printout of that check. Like, I took a Xerox. I, of course, banked that check because 70,000 was very important then. But I have that framed with me, the printout. So I think the first earnings, personally and for your business, are always the most special. But I think if there is one suggestion I have for anyone who wants to be in consumer business in India, is please be in general trade in some form or the other, whether it is selling packaged products, telecom, doesn't matter. But if you are able to appreciate the small business owner, the small shop owner, and how they think about the user, I think your abilities will be disproportionately higher. I feel the Gumti wala, who has a little shop, probably understands more about the customer than even some of our own algorithms, where we send CRM notifications and so on. And I think my aspiration remains that how can we replicate that by using technology.
So from what I make out of this is that small business owners, because they are in direct contact with the customers, they're able to understand the pain and interest of the customers much better as compared to the larger companies. So my question is, when you were this small business owner, what did you know that you wish Airtel knew about the customers?
Yeah, I think I would just say 2 things, right? I think the small business owner has actually 3 superpowers in my mind, which allows India as a unique market where I think there have been probably 5 different scenarios in the last 20 years where people have said kiranas and the small businesses are dead. And they've all sprung back, and they've sprung back with force and reinventing themselves. I think the first strength that the small businesses bring that you mentioned is they have deep relationships with their customers. The second is that the entrepreneurial spirit of the small shop owner in India or the small business owner in India is unparalleled. They work 24/7. Your viewers may have a lot of people whose parents run small shops. They would probably have taken no holiday in their life.
Yeah.
Like, they would not take any holiday because they don't want to keep their shop shut. It is so popular that in the north, you would say that very rarely anybody would say that शाम को दुकान बंद करके घर आते हैं. Nobody would say कि दुकान बंद करेंगे. The real word, the word people use is दुकान बढ़ा के आ जाओ. Because it's so important to them that a shop should not close. If a shop is open, it is open all the time. So that sense of ki my life and death is linked to this one shop is an entrepreneurial spirit. Right or wrong is a personal choice of the business person, but I think that makes a huge, like, no big company can compete with that. And I think the third one is a loyal set of people who are willing to work with them through thick and thin. Because, you know, every shop owner you'll find that they would have 2-3 ekdam like loyal people who have been with them through and through across generations. बच्चों से भी दोस्ती है, यारों से भी सब कुछ. I think that's the third thing that makes small business owners successful. What did I know that Airtel did not know? I think, first off, I think I owe a lot to Airtel and people like Ajay Puri, Manoj Kohli, who were, Ajay used to be CEO of Airtel Odisha at that point of time. He did very well at Airtel. I think recently, has retired from Airtel. And Manoj, of course, came to work at SoftBank later. I think I have learned so much from them. So I owe a lot of what I have learned to my SIM card selling days. But I think if I have to share about one or two things that I think Airtel did not know, the first is I think Airtel had a particular focus on a set of shop owners. Their particular focus was any shop owner which was in electrical or anything to do with some form of electronics or technology, they could be better distributors or sales companies. Whereas I focused almost significantly on the kirana shops because I saw that kirana shops had significant frequency of usage. In telecom, giving the SIM card is actually the easiest part of the job. The real job is the ARPU, which is making sure that they can have regular recharges.
Yeah.
And I thought that if we were able to focus a lot more on kirana stores, we'll be able to make a bigger difference. I don't know if Airtel knew it or not, but I think in my town, I was a lot more focused on this segment. The second is more than money, emotional validation mattered more to my retail partners. And I'll give some secondary example of it. So Airtel would always have what is called a trade scheme. It's a very popular word in general trade. So it would say that if you sell 5 SIM cards, you'd get this much as a bonus. If you sell 20, you get this as a bonus. I replaced one of those from cash to kind.
Okay.
So instead of getting cash at 5 SIM cards, you would receive a dinner with your wife at the only hotel that Raigada had. Now that only hotel was actually a 2-star hotel. But I think for our town, it was the only 5-star hotel, to be honest. And I sent letters to all their houses saying there is this dinner option. What it led to is this becoming a family discussion where the husband or the wife of whoever is running the shop would ask the other partner saying, by when are you going to be able to sell these 5 SIM cards? Because we might as well go to this dinner. So I think these little things made a difference, which I think maybe Airtel knew. But I think more than that, at least I was able to be creative enough to say I will come up with ideas that matters to my store owners and their families and be able to work with them to make them successful.
And this also saves cost.
This saves cost, of course.
Because a dinner is a much more cheaper kind option to give to somebody rather than giving them cash.
I think so, and you can also, of course, negotiate with the restaurant owner to get a better deal at volumes. But it's also something that people can flaunt, right? Like
exactly.
Out of 300 store owners, the 5 who went to the restaurant would say, like I was called to go to the restaurant to be able to have dinner because I had a great outcome. So I think, people appreciation is as or more important than monies. But I think that's one of the things that you can never have enough of or give enough of, even in in any other business setting also. So I think that's one thing that is one that I reflect on myself, saying how can I do more of it myself as well.
This is so interesting, man. Do you mind if I give you an exercise?
No, I don't. Okay. Let's do it.
वो देना तो दाल समरखंड. Okay, so Ritesh, here's a exercise. Okay.
Looks like an ITC box.
This is actually my friend's father's company.
Okay.
It's called Dal Samarkhand, and
nice.
they sell one of the best dal makhanis in Delhi.
Amazing.
Okay, and all the Bollywood actors also have it.
Nice.
Now, if you were the owner of this company, and you go to a kirana store, what are 3 or 4 questions that you would ask to gain customer insights?
Oh, good. That's
have a look at this first.
I would love to. Yes. It's good. It says a companion every naan and roti deserves.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is very interesting. So what are the questions I would ask a store owner? And then I'll give you some insights that I have by looking at this.
Okay.
The first bit I would often ask is saying that what kind of a shop owner am I going to? I would ideally like to go to a shop owner who has at least some kind of demand, because this fits 2 or 3 TGs, right? It fits the standard grocery TG कि आप दाल लेने जा रहे हैं. If you are going to have dal, you probably, or equivalent, that you want to try and sort of say that this is probably the mass premium version of dal that I have, which you don't need to cook. Second TG that is directly connected to this is the young millennials. No time to cook, done a lot of food ordering. Someday I want to feel like I want to cook. It's not really cooking, but anything that feels like cooking works. So is there a store where millennials often come? It may have nothing to do with food, but I'd still want to display it there. And the third, and I think this is an important one, is anything boutique or gourmet, where I feel like I could position this product as being relevant, high quality, or something interesting. Like you also called out that a lot of Bollywood actors use this product. It just tells you that, this has influence in sort of the higher strata in the society, and hence can it impact a lot of other audiences to purchase. So that's the first question I'd ask, that aapke paas, do you have one of these 3 segments of users? Do you have millennials, as in do you have, or college students, like do you have SIM card sales, do you have book sales, so anything in SIM cards, maybe more electronic types. Of course, the grocery is a much simpler one. And the third is, of course, anything that has influence, like a boutique shop, which could be anything like one of the D2C, or a bunch of D2C products if they're there in your retail store. For example, I used to live in Vatika in Gurgaon. And right outside of that, there was a little convenience store. And the convenience store mostly stocked products which were made by small businesses, but were made for the premium segment, much like this one.
Acha, okay.
Right? Like, they had rice which was grown by farmers and then was packaged by a small D2C company. And it's like I used to always call it as D2C only convenience store, where there were only D2C new age brands that I could find.
Okay.
But anyway, long story short, I think this is the first question I'd ask. The second is, I think if you think about it in terms of the price segment, this is 250 rupees. It's not cheap by any magnitude. So it's important that the customers that are coming have a salary of anywhere upwards of 6 lakh rupees.
Okay.
Because below 5 to 6 lakh rupees, I think a lot of people are going to look at it, say that this looks lovely, but should I spend it? Maybe they will also spend a few times, but they're not going to be my regular users. And I'm a big believer of lifetime value. So I would ask that how many customers in the shop come. I'll not ask 5 to 6 lakh rupees because shop owner wouldn't know this, but I would rather ask more like what kind of people come. If they say businessmen, or they say that they are, people who work in government jobs, or they're people who, like any direction where I feel like there is some level of affluence that exists, then I would possibly like to focus a lot more. And the third, and this is a very important one, there is a very important concept called in-store placement.
In-store placement,
right?
Yeah.
When you come to a shop, there are 3 or 4 places where the customer will almost 100% times see what's going on, right? So right above the shopkeeper's head, you'd see that often there will be a rack full of stuff, and there will be very nicely few things stacked in the area where the shopkeeper themselves is sitting. That's very important, because whatever consumer sees there is more often than not what the customer is wanting to buy. So I would like to see whether the shop has a good in-store placement place, because if it has the kind of demand segment of users that I want, if it has the affluence of customers I want, then all my job is to put a proposition of my product at a place where every customer can see and ask, "Ye Samarkand kya hai?" Right? So I think these are the 3 things I would do to be able to gain insights before I come in. But I'll tell you one insight from my side. Samarkand, as you know, is in Uzbekistan. That's right, no? Uzbekistan, I think. Yes.
Okay.
Lot of invaders to India came from Uzbekistan, but that's besides the story. Uzbekistan is less than, I'm in the travel business. I was giving all kind of knowledge about retail business, which I'm not in. I was doing this like ages ago. But coming back, I think Uzbekistan is less than a 3-hour flight and is an incredibly beautiful country. I have never been there, but I just met someone who's lived in Uzbekistan for 2 years and told me about some incredible historical stories about Samarkand and Uzbekistan. And I feel like it's a story that viewers should study at some point of time. What I would do is use those stories also to sell this product, to talk about how Indian ancient history and food and delicacies that we have has an ancient connection to some of these countries. Probably they named it with that context as well. So I would probably try and use that storytelling also.
Very interesting. We should show this to Shlok. He'll be very happy. Ritesh, now that you mentioned that in-store placement is important, I still so vividly remember that every time we went inside the grocery store, there are two places that I look. One is, like you pointed out, right above the head of the shopkeeper, and the other is the glass. Because you go inside, somebody's buying something, the first thing you do is look down. And the moment you look down, there you have a bunch of chocolates. And some chocolates are very interesting. In fact, some of the best chocolates that I've discovered are chocolates that I could find on that glass table.
Absolutely.
Right? And that is so interesting. Do you know any other spots that we should focus on when it comes to in-store placement?
No, I think the glass is absolutely the best. Think of it very, what's amazing is that, like I was telling you, the spirit of entrepreneurship among Indian small store owners is so incredible that this is the exact same thing that you will see in modern retail, like a modern retail store, that before you are at the checkout counter, there will be a bunch of thrifty, 20, 30, 50 रुपए की चीजें that you can just pick up at the end. कि मतलब pens होंगे, छोटी-छोटी चीजें होंगी that you can pick up. The same is true for the small shop owner, where they have figured that बच्चे जो हैं, उनकी थोड़ी height भी कम होती है. So they are just tall enough to see what's happening inside the glass. So a lot of chocolate companies insist they would pay money to the store owner to say कि मेरे सामान जो है यहाँ पे रहेंगे glass slab के अंदर में. And that's why you, myself, and every one of us, our favorite memory of being a child is when we go to the kirana store, parents go buy all the boring things, rice, dal, and so on, and we are looking inside that thinking कि कोई एक chocolate मिल सकती है क्या हमें. So I think this is a very thoughtful effort that our store owners have done much before probably organized retail figured it out.
This is so interesting. Now that I'm wondering, what all do small business owners know? And I think you are the best person to tell me this in the context of OYO, because you went from being a small business owner to now running a $1 billion company. So when you made that journey and now that you're at the top, what are the most important insights that you got by talking to your hotel owners, which you would otherwise not have got by just looking at data?
Yeah. Look, I think I want to take a step back and share that I have a fundamental thesis, which is that between competing with a small business owner and partnering with a small business owner, always better to partner them. And many people will disagree with me.
Okay.
But this is just my opinion. I believe that the small business owners have various things, like I mentioned, which are unique to themselves and is their unique strength, whether it is knowledge of the customer, ability to work exceptionally hard for their business, being able to get a significant amount of new insights. So to that extent, OYO is also sort of built on the partnership of substantial amount of small businesses. We don't own almost any hotels on our balance sheet. All the hotels that we partner with are owned by other small businesses who just happen to now sport the OYO brand, bring the OYO standards in their hotel, put the OYO technology and get increase in their business through us. On the other hand, 40% of my customers, in fact the largest segment of my customers, are actually small and medium business owners or small and medium business employees. So it's a business, like my company that I've built is built on the back of such partnerships that we've built over the many years. In fact, I'm coming here from Kolkata, and at Kolkata yesterday I spent almost 80% of my day meeting our hotel owners and some of our customers. So my perspective is that fundamentally over the last many years of my own journey from being a small business owner to a large business, if you can call it that, with many hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, is that fundamentally we have evolved to a place where we have appreciated that we are a large business doing business only or majority with small business owners, and hence we have to think, imagine and behave as much as we can as an organized small business owner. So I'll take some specific examples in this. The first and the foremost is making sure that you have ears to the ground. Same way as my hotel owners are speaking to their customers and their suppliers all the time, I'm speaking to my hotel owners all the time. Probably in a month, 10 to 15 days, I'm on the ground, meeting my hotel owners or homeowners around the world. I was in Europe until day before yesterday, meeting our homeowners there. Every day, I was having morning, evening sessions with homeowners. Then I came to Kolkata yesterday, again, events with our hotel owners. Today, I'm here at Bombay. And before I leave, I'd probably meet a few at the airport before I take my flight again. I want to go a little deeper about what I do in these sessions. So if there is a business person who's listening to it, or if there is someone who's trying to build a business with a community of small businesses around them, they can consider it as a benefit. The first one recommendation you'd be given by very smart people is don't bring a lot of customers in a room together, because they may each get to know about each other's deals. They may try and sort of bring some negative spirit in the room. I believe bad idea. You should get as many of your customers in a room as possible. They all genuinely not just feed off each other's energies and enthusiasm, they learn from each other and they see that, well, if this person is willing to partner with a company, maybe I should do as well. So you have to recognize that there is 10% risk that there are negative sentiments, but there is a 90% positive sentiment opportunity. So really investing in bringing people together is, in my view, a great thing, and I invest as much as I can in bringing our partners together. We've also learned it over the years. The second is I try and address both the good and the challenges upfront. So I would come and make a small 10-minute update about the business. And typically every quarter we send an NPS survey. NPS stands for Net Promoter Score, where every hotel owner sends an update about, did they get more revenue with OYO? Did they think our service was good? Did they think we helped them on delivering better customer service? And things like these, right? So I know at a hotel owner level, because I read these comments before I go there, I know exactly what are the top 3 or 4 issues and 3 or 4 things our owners love us for. So I would address both the good and the tough ones upfront. So that way, if there is someone who has an emotional happiness or unhappiness about any specific matter, you discuss that upfront and you're sharing about what is the journey of the company in the future, and you go back and update what you committed last time and the progress on the same. And the third, we go through each individual person in the room. Everybody introduces themselves, of course, to the extent that the room is less than 30 people. If the room is probably 100 people, then you can only do show of hands and questions. And more often than not, in a country like India, our hotel owners are quite a few, so it's bigger rooms. In Europe, etc., it's smaller rooms of 30 people or 40 people that we have. So to that extent, we go through everyone in the room. People share their views about what they like, what they don't like, their recommendations, suggestions, and so on. Now, we may not be able to execute on all of them. But almost always I am told by our patrons, we call them, our small business partners, that it is rare for a company to come here and listen and make the difference. So 3 years back in 2019, you may remember that there was a lot of, there was some news about hotel owners being unhappy with OYO and so on. I think I have learned that criticism can be, of course, a lot of noise and very little signals, but you should keep your ears open. So when I saw the criticism, I thought that my job is to go listen to our partners. And when I listened to them, I recognized that this is a great opportunity, and probably I had just stopped doing this, which I was doing pre-2019 when I was a small business owner. And I stopped doing this as a big business. So that's when I thought that I would evolve from being a small business that became large to being an organized small business in terms of mindset.
This is what reminds me of what Brian Chesky once said. I was watching this talk where he was delivering a talk to college students along with the founder of LinkedIn. He mentioned one thing and that stuck with me. He said, do things that don't scale. And what he meant by that is that, I think this came from Paul Graham when they were building Airbnb. Paul Graham said that you should do things that don't scale. As in, don't build a company that's going to go on to become $1 billion company. Just build a company that can serve 100 customers in a way that they would remember and tell other people.
Yeah.
So what Brian Chesky did is he literally went to every homeowner's house, spoke to every guest. In fact, one of the founders actually acted as a photographer because they understood that homeowners are not able to click good pictures even though they had a great house. And that is how they were able to catch hold of those 100 customers who then went and told other people about it across the world, because of which Airbnb was able to solve its cold start problem. But if you ask any so-called seasoned entrepreneur who does not have his ears to the ground, he would tell you that just roll out incentives for both customers as well as homeowners and they'll just come flocking in. And on the outside, it looks like a sustainable way to grow, considering the fact that you have $1 billion in your bank. But what these people did was actually sustainable, but came at zero cost, which is so interesting. So you're saying that you should do things that don't scale. One of that is having your ears to the ground, which is as you scale, it is important to communicate with the customers. And you also mentioned the NPS mechanism to measure where the customer is happy, where the customer is not happy, so that you have a clear breakup of what exactly is the small business owner or the partner unhappy about, so that you can accumulate them together, understand what is the issue, and then solve them.
Yeah, look, I think first off, I think we are, of course, incredibly inspired by Brian and his team at Airbnb. Airbnb is also a shareholder at Oyo.
Oh.
So I think every time I have met Brian, I've come back being even more inspired, and we've enjoyed working with Airbnb as a partner. And I've listened to this getting your act right up front. I think my view is of the same thing, or my view is similar, but probably slightly unique to our business or what I have learned over the years. It is that I often ask myself that it is a proven fact that founder-driven companies end up creating more value than only professional-driven companies. It's a proven fact. There's enough case studies to talk about it. So what can a founder bring uniquely that others can't bring? And let me try and sort of contextualize it at the Oyo setting. At the Oyo setting, I am the least educated, I am the least experienced, and I am the least probably proven talent in the management team, right? There are probably 4 people who worked at McKinsey and did really well there, 2 people who went to Harvard Business School, and various others, right? Very competent folks. And when I look at them, I feel like, they know, and their ability to execute is so good that, I have a lot to learn from them. So I ask myself that what can I bring uniquely to the table, which can help our company expand and be even more successful? So I think being able to bring unique context is one thing that brings this difference. Second, which is what I do with this client meetings around the world. Second thing that I can bring is high quality product building. I think that's an important part where, because I'm so close to my own customers, my ability to help create the product experiences that we feel could make sense. Like a simple part of it is that if you flip open the Oyo app, the time taken from the homepage to the time your booking is done is probably the fastest among any other hotel app. You push 2 buttons and your booking is done. It may seem like such an easy thing to do, but the behind the scenes is you have to have live inventory, and hence your POS device has to be actively used in 100% of your 11,000 hotels in India. Second, you have to make sure that the check-in experiences are healthy, and in order to make sure that, how do you ensure that the front office manager is well trained to ensure the experience is good quality? Third, how do you convince a hotel owner to accept a paid hotel reservation, because you can't have 2 buttons if the payment friction is there in the middle. Fourth, how do you enable ability to see live inventory across channels? That's why we have to become the single franchisor of the individual hotel, wherein the hotel distributes to Oyo, and Oyo distributes on its own app, but it also distributes using Booking.com, Expedia, Airbnb, and many other websites as well. So that way we see all the bookings coming into the hotel, and hence are able to truly give visibility of the live inventory. And then if there is those, 1 year back higher percentage, but now in that 1% range where the customer doesn't get the best experience, how do you respond to it? All of this effort goes in to make just those 2 steps happen, right? So my perspective is product design and development is the second area that I think an entrepreneur can bring unique value on the table. And the third is, of course, being able to set clarity with the company's goals. I think I call myself Chief Clarity Officer, which is if you speak to any colleague or team member who's considering leaving a company, among the top 3 reasons, I've often found a reason which is I don't have clarity of what I am doing or what I should do to be successful. And I try to make sure that I can help provide clarity to our people about the work they should do to be able to make sure the company and themselves are successful in the long term. But I think that's true for most entrepreneurs. Not in that order, of course, but those are the 3 things I would say.
Ritesh, you mentioned something very important about clarity and communication. And I'll tell you a challenge that I am facing right now. And one of my friends, Ayush Wadhwa, he has solved it in perhaps the most brilliant way possible. So you look at this team, right? This is Aulka team. Okay, they are shooting this entire episode. In fact, they've been shooting all my episodes. Now, what I found very fascinating about Ayush is that even Ayush's intern is equally obsessed, equally particular about the perfection of the work, and more importantly, he also has the same soft skills as Ayush. And I often tell him that when I speak to your team, I almost feel like I'm talking to you. So how is it that your team is a reflection of who you are? And what he tells me is that it just happened by chance. And I know that it hasn't happened by chance. So in my organization also, when I tried to do this with 4 to 8 people, it was quite good. Because eventually what I started to notice is that the person who had just come in 6 months back, that person started to find more flaws in his own work, because I'm obsessed with being self-critical. As in, if you can just look at your work and say that, there are 100 things that are wrong with it, then what you essentially do is you decrease the probability of someone else pointing it at you, right? So self-critical is one such value that I try to, I could say, percolate down to the person who has just come into the organization. But I'll tell you the other agencies that I've dealt with. The problem is that when you shake hands with the founder, that founder is an amazing guy. He's brilliant, customer obsessed, he focuses on value for money, and so on and so forth. But the person who's actually handling my account, that person is not the founder. He is this person, an employee or an intern who's just come into the organization 6 months before. Now, my organization is only 8 to 15 people strong, but that organization is 70 to 100 people strong. And over there, what I see is a big mismatch between the values of the founder and the values of the employee. Now, when it comes to an organization of just 70 people, when it becomes so difficult and so far away, how do you manage to keep this communication, clarity, and value system intact, especially when you scale so fast?
Yeah, I will first begin by saying that we are not absolutely successful in this. We are better than where we were 2 years back, but I think next 2 years will become better than where we are today. But let me give a very interesting anecdote to it. You meet a newly wedded couple, you will find that they have distinct perspectives. You meet them 10 years later, you will find both have become a little bit like each other, almost invariably, right? Yeah. So I think one way of this happening, where the founder's value and their way of thinking goes to the last mile, and the other way around also, is just time. Is the more time if people are able to spend with each other, they appreciate how each other think, they think similarly, their ability to make a difference is similar. So I think, I'm sure the intern or the last mile person at Ayush's team would probably have been there for at least a few months. So I think every time they get exposed to each other, the energy gets transferred, right? So that's in my view the first one, that is just time helps to make this happen. And it's even more accentuated is because if you think about it, especially in India and some other geographies also, people end up spending more time with their co-workers than their families. Yeah. So agar 10 saal mein, if the wife and the husband have some qualities of each other, then you should imagine that in 10 years or in 5 years, that will be the same among colleagues. But there are ways to short circuit it. So this should happen by itself over a period of time. But there are ways to short circuit it. In my view, the ways to short circuit it is exceptional amount of effort in the founder and the management to directly engage with the last mile. Second, now there can be many scalable ways of doing it. Can you write a letter every month to them? Can you have a all hands with the teams very often? Can you have smaller group forums where you show up and speak? Can there be all hands at an organization level that people are going in and having conversations with? Can you have surveys the same way as you have owner surveys to be able to hear people's feedback and commentary? So in my view, there are lots of these ways in which we can create such outcomes. But I believe that, long story short, every entrepreneur will find their way of enabling it. There is no singular set in stone process by which you can reach and communicate to your last mile. You have to be authentic about it. It has to have truly you characteristic in it, because if there is no truly you way of reaching out to your people, then your people will never really appreciate the value system that you come with, right? So I think authentic efforts to be able to make sure that how you think reaches out to people is valuable. I do it by making sure that the same way as I meet our hotel owners, right after that I'd have a small session with only my team members. Again, we go across everyone in the room. Each one shares their views, their perspectives, and so on. And I do it in other ways also, right? Like I'm on every single teams group, most teams groups. So there is almost no team member in the company who's not in a Teams or a WhatsApp group with me.
Acha.
Which means that there is no employee who doesn't have my phone number, right? So I try to make sure that I can be as accessible as possible, and I try to ensure that I start a conversation for the first time, because I always say this one important thing, that's one of our value systems, is when in doubt, ask. More often than not, I feel like people just don't ask, and then if you don't know, then you will act in a way that you deem right versus what you think is right for the company.
That is so interesting. You mentioned about, again, do things that don't scale, which is give your number to every single employee in the organization, even if it's a 10,000 people organization.
Absolutely.
That is so interesting. You mentioned something about value system. And what did you say? You said, if you don't know, ask. So do you have like 5 to 6 values that you've written down, and then do you put in conscious efforts into making sure that that is known to every single employee in the organization?
Yeah, so what we've done is we have 4 key values, but there are 20 manifestations of those values, which we have written down and shared with our colleagues. So I'll share the manifestation examples, and then I'll talk about the first 4, right? I'm trying to use millennial words, being a millennial myself, right? So, we'll get there. So I think 1 is when in doubt, ask. The second is mission is greater than team, is greater than me, which is a important one for us. The third one is over communication is better than under communication. And then we have 1 click below that also. The 1 click below that is meeting is better than calling, is greater than messaging, is greater than emailing. Because we feel like if you're just across the table, the ability to solve a problem is so much more easier.
Yeah, versus an email.
Versus an email. Like email is the absolute last, right? Like if nothing else works. But at the same time, with our clients, we actually say that everything plus email.
Oh.
Because
so
we want to make sure
writing.
there's a record and you've done the right thing and so on, right? So there are various manifestations that we have, but the 4 value system is, the first one, and not in this order, is respect, which means that in our company, right, there's a front office manager who's working for the company, and there's a data scientist working for the company. They couldn't be more different in their backgrounds, their view of the world, and so on. But our data scientist is speaking to the front office manager to understand what data labels would they need access of and what data do they have access of, so which they can compute and create better impacts. And the other way around, where if the front office manager uses 2 systems and the data is not flowing properly, then they would sometimes call the data scientist and say that, I need help, and can you get these 3 data points which the customer is giving, auto compute it and give me a result that I can use for my everyday decision making and life. If they don't have respect with each other, the ability to go further is very limited. So I think respect is 1. Second is trust. I think we are in a business where we work with so many small businesses. Like in 2019, there was some temporary hamper in our trust. Our business got hurt. The trust is getting better, the business is getting better. It's deeply linked. The third is bias for action. We actually have a little bracket before that, which we call accountable bias for action, which means that you have bias for action, but you take responsibility for whatever outcomes that comes with. And the last is ownership, which is when things go wrong, we don't say that that person got it wrong or this person got it wrong. And the simple perspective is, if you're a leader, you take responsibility, which means that if there is troubles, like for example, our company had losses FY 2019 and 2020, which was significant. It was my business plan and my strategy due to which that outcome came. And I think there are multiple places we could have done better internally, but I think I as a leader am responsible for it. So I think that's a pretty simple perspective that I and all of our colleagues and leaders sort of pursue with themselves. But not just being responsible. Being responsible means that you will not just own the challenge, but also own fixing it or solving it. Because in a lot of big companies, what happens is if somebody makes a mistake, their leader has to step aside. At OYO, we built a culture where we say that if your team made a mistake, you don't just take ownership for it, you will fix it. The reason why we've done this is because in a lot of larger organizations, senior leaders never talk about problems because they feel if I talk about this problem, I will be asked to step aside.
Oh, okay.
Because somebody else will have to come fix it. But if I know that the company will actually sort of tell me that mistake done, but you will take the ownership and fix it, and here is the time frame for you to fix it, the ability for them to be able to bring up the best challenges or the biggest challenges for the company is far higher. But I think these are the 4 things that we typically have kept as key value systems for us.
You mentioned something about 2019, and after we did the Shark Tank episode, I got 2 or 3 lengthy emails saying that OYO has taken all my money, they have not returned our money, we're not able to cope up. And when I actually went back to study the story, I realized that the media has also covered it to a large extent. So, and then I also had a conversation with Nitin, and he gave me an elaborate story of what exactly happened and the position you were put in. So could you throw some light on that? Because I think every business owner who's going through something, if they understand the larger context and the position of the company, they'll be able to understand their position in the context better. Because when there is no information, the only thing that they know is, oh, maybe we've been looted, right? So what happened in 2019? What happened after 2019 during the COVID, and how did you overcome that challenge?
Yeah, no, look, I think it's an important part of our experience because often when they see a business which is, OYO is now 10 years old, they think that the last 10 years have all been of glory, growth and success, right? That's never really the case. You are put to test with almost a situation where you can't even, people would almost around you write you off. So until 2018, we were predominantly an India-oriented business. In 2019, we started scaling globally, but also within India very substantially. From 2019 early through 2020 March, which is sort of the 15 months period, we reflected by the end of 2019 that we probably had grown quicker than we should have in terms of our plan. And how do you determine whether you have grown quicker than you should have? Is that you're not able to sort of keep up with supporting where your owners are seeking help for, your customers are seeking help for, and things like those. So I think we started sort of getting to a place where we, consolidated our business to sort of say that now we're not going to grow, we're going to focus on consolidating our business. So what did we do as an outcome? We said we'll reduce the number of cities we are in, we'll be in as many cities that we feel we can serve very well. We said that we will not do certain kind of contracts which are not commercially attractive for our company or commercially sustainable for us as an outcome, and things like those. By the time we were consolidating, life had different plans because in March 2020, COVID hit. So a company that was growing triple-digit percentages year on year, overnight, the company lost 70% of its revenues from what existed, right? So not only did you not grow, what you were left with was also down by 70%. So most people understandably wrote this story of saying that why OYO is most certainly going to wind up during the COVID period. And it was so eloquent that some newspapers actually at the slightest hint that there was any challenge would actually write a news story about it as an outcome saying Oyo Pakka is going to not exist after this next month. I think the 2 or 3 contexts behind it is what did we do during that COVID period to be able to survive and come out, and just not the story of Oyo but the story of the broader travel industry. I think the first one is we used to have 2 business models. We used to have a business model where we used to franchise our hotels, and where we used to have a business model where we used to have minimum guarantees. We got out of the business model of minimum guarantees. We don't exist in that business model anymore. And the reason why we feel it made sense for us is we felt if the hotel is owned by someone and managed by the same person, it is just right that both incentives are the most aligned. When higher revenue both make more and lower revenue both make less. If you make it in a manner where higher revenue one makes more and lower revenue one makes less, by design it doesn't lead to best outcomes for our customers, for our company and to our hotel owners. So this is the one change we made, and naturally that led to some of our hotel owners not feeling very good about this impact of having their hotel contract be changed. Now within that, our company has endeavored to work with as many hotel owners as we can to be able to make sure that we give them some little benefit or the other to bring them into the new business model. And by and large, we have succeeded. But out of probably 11,000 hotels, we still have probably 30-40 owners where we have not been able to achieve it, but we are continuously working with them to try and make sure that we get them across the line. Second big change we had to do is focus on fewer markets. We had grown globally, right? Like to Europe, China, Southeast Asia, US, Latin America. During COVID, we prioritized Europe and Southeast Asia markets. Now, of course, we've started growing in US as well. But some markets such as China have remained deprioritized from such period of time. And I think the last but not the least is that being able to make sure that you conserve capital to be able to see through. Because COVID wave 1 finished, we thought that the world was recovering, and as life would have it, COVID wave 2 came, which was far more intense, far more hurtful to travel companies. By the time wave 2 ended, New Year's got celebrated, wave 3 came, which was not as bad as wave 2, but it was still there. So I think to get through 3 sustained waves, I think being able to make sure we raised more capital was also critical. So that's why we raised also substantial amount of capital during COVID to see through. Some may argue that we raised more capital than we needed, but I'm happy we did it, and we actually repaid some of that capital recently because we had that cash. The company is now cash flow generating, and we are happy to scale it up again. So from our perspective, we are actively looking to make sure that any individual person who may have had any challenge with us, we would like to make sure that we sit across the table and help them in some way. Even in situations where we feel like contractually it is not required. The only reason why those 30-40 situations have not been resolved is because we've agreed on a certain solution with hundreds of other owners. We don't want those owners to feel like they got the bottom end of the stick if the 30 to 40 owners get a benefit that is far greater than many of the others realized over a period of time.
Can you explain what exactly is this minimum guarantee model that you're working on?
No, we are not working on it anymore.
No, you were working on it.
Yes. So I think when we used to enter new cities, right, in various locations across the nation, the first 2 hotels, for them to convince to join our network was harder. So we used to tell them that this is a certain amount of revenue you would always receive from Oyo, no matter what. Because we were quite confident about our ability to add business. But that was even at the peak available to only 9%, 8 to 9% of our hotel owners. Because that is those many new cities that you can be at, right? Yeah. But those 8 to 9% was also by number quite significant, close to 1,000. So I think due to which it required such amount of deliberations with each one of the hotel owners during the COVID time period.
So this was like, for example, if I were to put it in the form of a story, it's like if I've got 16 rooms, then you would make sure that you give me the rent for at least 5 of those rooms all throughout the month, regardless of whether those 5 rooms were occupied or they were not occupied. Is that correct?
I think it would be that if I have 16 rooms, 5 of my rooms will get occupied in some form or the other.
Okay.
And if they are not occupied, then the company would pay you the rent for it.
Okay. And during COVID, you had to switch. You told them that now we can no longer give you this guarantee.
No, so this changes we had started actually, some hotels we had started, which were new cities that we were shutting down from pre-COVID itself, from December 2019. But even in the cities that we were in those cities also we started switching later. Now, the cities where we switched even before COVID or even early start of COVID, there were multiple reasons for it. Some were due to business model, some were due to certain contractual obligations that us and our hotel owners had. There were various reasons of it, but the net outcome of this was that we entirely moved away from this business model and moved to a singular business model, partly because simplicity is very critical in times like these. So, for example, if you have 4 kinds of business model, then you have to have 4 kinds of reconciliation systems, 4 kinds of account payable teams, 4 types of account receivable teams, 4 kind of contractual management teams. The simpler your organization became, for future contracts, life became as much simpler as well.
Very interesting. Now I want to take you back to the OYO story. Okay. After selling SIM cards, you came to Mumbai, right?
No, after selling SIM cards, I went to Kota.
Okay. And from there you came to Mumbai.
I'll tell you my first story of coming to Mumbai.
Okay.
So, I came to Mumbai first time, I think in 2011, I think. I was still in high school.
Okay.
I was in Kota. And first time I came in a train to Bandra terminus. That's where the train dropped me. And I had like almost no money. So I stayed at a place opposite to the railway station which said its name was a hotel. But it was not a hotel. Like it was a bedroom with no roof and so on. But anyway, on the way back, I didn't have a train ticket because it was last minute travel. So I had a general ticket. Somebody in the station told me, yeah, I will get you a sleeper ticket. Pay me 100 rupees. I thought this is the best deal in my life. I paid him 100 rupees. He gave me a ticket. The ticket looked and felt exactly like a sleeper ticket, but it was not a sleeper ticket.
Okay. Then what was it?
It was just a printout.
Okay. And then
I
you
was-
lost the money.
I lost the money. I went back to the general bogie, stood there and got to the other side.
Okay.
So I have had quite incredible experiences of coming to Mumbai. But look, Mumbai is an incredible city. But if you have less than 2,000 rupees in your pocket, it was not an easy city to come live in 10, 15 years back.
Correct.
I've even once stayed at a shop which at night doubled itself into becoming a nightly hotel. Like they'll just put the mattress on the floor and you can stay there if you like.
You stayed over there.
Not first time, but one of the times.
Okay. So how was OYO born then? It was called Oravel back then, right?
It was called Oravel back then. So I'll tell you the long story short. I grew up in Raigada in Odisha. After my 10th grade, I went to Kota, Rajasthan for my engineering training, like many others go. I realized very quickly that while education was interesting, but the primary intent for me to come far away from home was because I wanted to try and do different things. I interned for little companies. किसी के लिए छोटी वेबसाइट बना दी, किसी के लिए सोशल मीडिया कैंपेन चला दिया, things like those. Whatever income I would make, I would use that to travel. I absolutely love travel. So I would take like buses from Anand Vihar ISBT, which is one of the key bus stations for Delhi, and go to somewhere in Uttarakhand, Himachal, and that sort of piqued my interest in sort of traveling as much as I could. Actually, that's how I met my then girlfriend and now wife, who I've dated for probably 11 years before we married.
Wow.
Because she was in Uttarakhand back then. Okay. But long story short, I think I traveled with any little money I had. And every time I traveled, I saw these little guest houses, little hotels, and I thought, what if I could sell them online? Because they were unavailable. So my concept was unavailable places brought online. That was a very simple perspective. And I started actually with a blog, where I'd write a blog about these are the 5 places that are unheard of in Dehradun, which you should check out. And I would have like Shaheen Bagh in it, and a few other, which is of Shaheen Bagh is of course very expensive, but they're also very low cost places that I would find. And similarly in Manali, similarly in various other places, and go there in like one of these buses where the driver has to stand up to turn the steering wheel, right? Like these are not the automated buses. But I enjoyed traveling. So that's how it started. It started as a hobby to begin with, translated into business where we could let people sort of book these places online in terms of construct. Did it for, so anyway, so until 12th grade, 11th and 12th grade, I was doing these internships and so on. After 12th grade, there's 6 months between school and college, right? That's when I thought I was, naive enough to start a company of my own. So I started a business which was Oravel back then, did it for a few months, realized that just the online booking service was not good enough because these small businesses required a lot more hand holding. In this period, I stayed every day at a different guest house or a different hotel. And that's when I sort of thought that maybe one of the people I'm meeting, maybe I should pitch them to become their single provider of their entire premises, like the single distribution partner, distribution, brand, franchising, upgradation of the property and so on. So that's how I met Rajesh Yadavji, who was our first OYO hotel owner. And, life has never been the same again, of course.
When did Peter Thiel Fellowship happen? Did this happen after you started Oravel or before?
After I started Oravel and after I had started the first OYO hotel. We didn't call it OYO then, we called it, I think I had started calling it OYO. It was called Oravel Inns cum OYO as a two-sided name around itself. Yes.
Okay, and then you went to Thiel Fellowship.
Yes.
How did you apply? What did you write in that form? Because from what I read, there were only 7 people who got selected away from US and you were one of them.
Well, I think I'll tell you the long story because you said deeper is better. How did I get to know about Peter Thiel in the first place? So I like watching movies like many other Indians. So I saved up 2-3 महीने का pocket money, stipend ये सब. क्योंकि खर्चे तो हो ही जाते हैं, मतलब आप जानते हैं when you're young you sort of go and eat somewhere, you take 2 more auto rides, the pocket money anyway very little. So मैंने कहा था मूवी देखेंगे and I'll go to watch this movie in Delhi. So that was my plan. दिल्ली जाएंगे कोटा से और मैंने सोचा था साथ में और भी चीज़ें करेंगे काम वाम की. तो I went to watch this movie called The Social Network, in which Peter Thiel, not himself, but somebody who acts as Peter Thiel stars. So I see that this guy is someone who does seem like would be willing to take a bet on a 12th grader like me. So next time I went to the cyber cafe. These are the days where cyber cafe used to exist for internet. 10 rupees per hour, you get access to the internet. So I went and searched about Peter Thiel. This was a time when Thiel Fellowship was actually quite controversial in the US because a lot of students from Harvard had dropped out to become a Thiel Fellow, and then there was a big debate between Harvard Dean and Peter Thiel over the years. So इसलिए the news popped up. So I said पढ़ते हैं इसके बारे में. तो I saw कि इसमें 70 लाख रुपए मिलते हैं. You get 70 lakh rupees. You got to give no equity, and he supports you to build a business. So I thought interesting. So I started looking at the application. Very interesting questions in that. So I applied purely because of the questions.
For example?
What is the one contrarian thing that you believe in?
Contrarian means what?
Contrarian means that what you believe in, but everybody in the society disagrees with, or what the entire society agrees with, but you disagree with.
Like education is a scam.
Well, I think education, in my view, fundamentally, is exceptionally valuable. I'll tell you, in our Thiel Fellowship, the contract starts by saying, it's a popular saying by an author, we never let university interfere with education. Right? So education, I believe, the foundation believes, the Thiel Foundation believes, and I think generally at large the community agrees that it is exceptionally important. But education and formal university should not be seen as the same thing. University is just a way of education. You can get education from there. You can get education from the growth school. You can get education from watching some of the Shark Tank episodes. You can get education by being on the ground. There are many ways of pursuing education. I also don't believe that formal education or university is a bad thing. I think university is quite valuable. But I feel the format of university education, the way it has been imparted over many years or decades, that needs to be challenged and questioned. And I think once challenged, I think it will improve for the better only.
True.
Right? So a lot of my colleagues went to great universities, and I have colleagues who went to night school also, who directly report to me. And they've all done very well in their careers and lives. So you could have somebody who went to the best school in the world and somebody who went to a night school, right? And both are doing equally well in terms of their success and the impact they're making. So in my view, fundamentally, education and its education is exceptionally important. Format of education is many. Education policies and systems need to be questioned. I'm happy that there's a new education policy that have come, and if you read it, it's incredible. I think it's probably one of the most modern education policies around the world. It'll take time to get implemented, but I think it's a very thoughtful effort. And I think it's not, I'm not saying this just for the Indian education system, where the new education policy is highly impactful. But I also say this for the US education system, which I think people say, of course, invests a lot in research, has a format of major and minor education. But I think ability to sort of bring more critical thinking, ability to sort of bring more real life impact, I think there is a lot of opportunity even in the US education system. But I think that's sort of what is the conversation around the Thiel Fellowship, I would say.
Was this the contrarian answer that you wrote?
No, I did not. So I'll tell you what I wrote. I think two things. The first bit was that a lot of people believe that young people cannot disrupt the hospitality sector because a sector where experience, etc. counts. I said, I believe that experience counts, but my experience of being a front office manager, being in my own hotels for a long time, at least allows me or qualifies me to be able to make a difference, and hence I can build a long-term successful enterprise in the field of hospitality. And the second thing that I also wrote about is that entrepreneurs have to be fundamentally contrarian. Because if you believe that a certain business is going to be successful as it is, then the whole world also believes it, right? Like if that was not the case, then it was not probably the opportunity that an individual entrepreneur would have to go build a new business. So I'm sure that when Bhavish started Ola Electric, people would have said bad idea. When Dipinder started Zomato, people would have said it's a bad idea. But because they were contrarians in the first place, they were able to create healthy enterprises. And when they became successful, I think, and people became their users, they said, well, this makes sense. So my sense is, and that's probably been our own, at least that's been my experience as well. So my perspective is that these are two things I wrote, and I think I was a naive 18, 19-year-old. And I remember after I became a fellow, so first off, the reason why I was so excited about it, so I wrote the application, forgot it. Luck plays a huge role, my friend. So I think the application was going to end 31st December. I forgot and slept. Next morning I woke up and I remember waking up so sad, saying कि अब तो नहीं apply कर पाए. इतना काम भी किया and couldn't apply. Then I figured that applications were closing Pacific time. So there were a few hours left. So I applied. Or even not, I think they just probably kept the applications open. But I think I was happy that I could apply. Then after I applied, then there were interviews happening. Product head at Twitter was interviewing you. A product manager at Facebook was interviewing you. For somebody who's just a 12th grader, to get to meet these people is such a big deal. कि मतलब मुझे लगा Thiel fellow बने नहीं बने, it doesn't matter. I just want to have the opportunity to pursue this interviews and getting to meet people. Then one day I get this letter saying you're among the top 40 candidates, come to the US, and the top 20 get selected.
Come to the US?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I said free flight to the US.
They gave you the flight ticket also?
They gave me a flight ticket and a visa letter. But I didn't have even a passport. Right? Like I had not been in a flight, passport, कुछ ये सब तो alien concept था ना. अपना तो मतलब हर रोज कैसे निकलेगा उसकी लड़ाई थी. US जाना था. But I was so excited. Like I had no interest. Like I had zero confidence that I would become a Thiel fellow. But my only hope was that I make this free trip to the US. पहले तो passport बनाने में तकलीफ. Because if you don't have a passport, you don't have a voter ID, nothing. I was just 18, तो तब कोई elections भी नहीं थे, तो कोई voter ID सब कुछ भी नहीं था, because national election just ended when I started or around that time. So voter ID was not there. So my mother, like I think only a mom can put in the effort that she put to get the passport. But I didn't tell her it was because of dropping out. If she knew, she would never make it.
Okay.
So I only told there is some person who's generous enough to come let me go to the US to travel once. So she said, perfect, like no child of mine, nobody in our family has ever gone to like US. So it's a like family in the sense, मतलब दूर दराज का family. So उसलिए हम इनको भेजेंगे बच्चे को, कोई बात नहीं, और कोई विदेशी इंसान मान भी गया. She was just so happy about it. There was no other Asian resident who had been a Thiel Fellow until the year where I became a fellow. So to that extent, I also didn't have much expectation. But anyway, long story. I think I spoke at Nikhil's podcast also about how the visa process happened, so I'll not bore you with details. I got the visa, went to the US. But then when I met these 40 other people, 39 other people, I found they're people like me. They have same enthusiasm of growth. They have same insecurity of failure of their startup. They have same history that everybody thinks they're a rebel. Come from different walks of life. Some of them were very wealthy. Some of them not so much. But very similar people. So to that extent, then I felt that up to I will put in the effort to come in top 20. The program sort of incentivizes or brings in people purely on the back of their enthusiasm as well as their commitment to their ideas, to what they want to build. Because at that point of time, nobody really knows what they're going to build eventually, right? And of course, I think some of the other startups have done really well. So for example, just one class before us was this person called Dylan Field. Dylan is, the founder of Figma. Figma is a very popular app. So we used to do some potluck dinners where we used to discuss saying that, do you really think that people will go from having a native Adobe product to using online service of Figma? And of course, they've done really well over the years. Then I think 2 classes ahead of us was the founder of Ethereum, which is of course a very popular cryptocurrency over the years. But more than that, I think they've built a service which is probably one of the most well-run services on blockchain over the years. So I think fundamentally this kind of cohorts of talent sort of inspire you even more that you can do even better yourself over the years. And the Thiel Fellowship changed my life to the extent that it really allowed me to think big, where I saw founders who were having no resources, much like me, but were willing to think that they want to build businesses which are the biggest in the world. So it really taught me that if you had big ideas and ability to execute them, capital eventually you will be able to raise, which was not the feeling I had before I went to the fellowship.
Wow. You mentioned something about the filtration mechanism, which was so successful that it was able to pick the founder of Figma and the founder of Ethereum when everybody else would have called them crazy. So my question is, how did they filter apart from this application process? What questions did those guys ask you to measure 2 things, your commitment towards ideas and your enthusiasm? Because both these attributes are things that you cannot measure over an interview, right? Yeah. So if this system has been so successful, there is some method to this madness, right? So what is this method?
No, so this is a very important part. I think, at least in my interviews, perseverance was a very critical part of effort, because the foundation wants to, so foundation doesn't mandate not going back to college. So there are cases where students have dropped out of, let's say, MIT, come to the program, and after 2 years gone back to university to complete it. So for 2 years, you have to stop out of college. But if you do really well, you may not need to go back to college, right? That's the thesis, effectively. And the program wants to bring in founders or fellows who fundamentally, at least this is my opinion of it, who fundamentally want to sort of make long-term difference, and in the face of crisis and challenges would actually not give up, would come back stronger. So to that extent, my view is that the program really, the questions that I would get asked is that, when was the last time you felt like you were going to fail? And I said, well, it was 2 weeks back when my landlord threw me out of my barsati, right? So I think what made, for me, this logical sense, I think for them, probably they were sort of looking at it and looking at perseverance with those situations. I think the second thing that I also found quite interesting in the questions that I received is the ability to be open-minded about ideas. So for example, I got this question saying, well, you're doing something like this in India, but we encourage fellows, or we believe that fellows can do really well in the Bay Area because we have a lot of introductions and people we know here. That if you find an interesting idea here, would you build it here in the Bay Area? I said, look, I am very focused on solving a problem. I want to give this a fair shot. I will put in all the effort I have to make this successful, due to which I'd like to come back during fellowship only back to India to build this. But hey, if that doesn't work, you should know that I am most thankful to have access to the Thiel community. So I will come back and ask help for it. So I think openness to idea while having commitment to yours is sort of what I think they may have taken away. But I have not spoken to some of them for a long time who interviewed me. One of them I've spoken to. His name was Airtel. He was, I think, a product manager at Facebook, if I'm not wrong. And I spoke to him because we had some issue on our Facebook account 2 years after we started, and I could reach out to him, send our trademarks, and get access to our page back. So, but I think I haven't spoken to Airtel in years. This reminds me I should call him as a follow-up.
Okay.
But the interviewers were fantastic. But I think the point that you mentioned, right? These are attributes that I believe fundamentally a lot of early stage VCs don't invest in. Because when the companies are so early, the idea, the early starting project are dime a dozen. What matters is whether the individual you're backing is that individual, the person you want to partner with in the very long term. Because this is an idea stage business, right? Like very little or no revenues. So to that extent, you're not really investing in a business. You're investing in the individual. And as a fellow, that's what they're doing. They're betting on individuals, regardless of businesses they pursue. There are multiple fellows who have changed 5 businesses over the years and continue to do something else. There is one person, his name is Delian. Delian used to build his own startup. I think it was called Nightingale. Then he left that, went to work for Khosla Ventures, but now runs an aeronautic startup, which just raised over $100 million, building manufacturing capabilities in space, right? So it doesn't matter what's the startup you went into, because the fellowship places significant effort on the individual they're backing rather than the business that they're backing in terms of context.
How do they do that? What is the program like?
So the program is interesting to the extent where it is deeply connected and not very deeply connected.
Okay.
Or deeply connected to the extent that when you start the program, you write a letter to your 2-year younger self, right? So you can only open that letter 2 years later.
Oh, okay.
Right? So you write a letter as if you're writing to yourself today from 2 years later. And you write, what are a few things? Sorry, it's the reverse. You're writing to your future self.
Okay.
And you write, here are the things that if you did, I would be very proud, right? So the 2 years later, you open that letter and see whether you've been able to progress and get to such outcomes or not. So it places significant effort on goal setting, tangible goals that can bring in an impact.
Okay.
Second, there is a active tracking of it. So every month, you send in an update to be able to sort of see what kind of tangible outcomes you are able to receive in terms of improvements. Third, there is a Thiel community app, where there's an entire group of people in the Bay Area who are friends of Peter Thiel and the community who engage. Fourth is Peter Thiel himself spends time with you. He had breakfast with me. He had just written 0 to 1. So I have a hand-signed copy of his, and showing his dreams. He wrote, for your journey from 0 to 1 million rooms. And we had particularly 20 rooms at that point of time in OYO. So it was a long way back. But I think he saw something in me, because I couldn't believe that I would do it, but I thought, he's writing it, so I can't say no. So I accepted that. But I think a few of these things are how you're deeply connected, but the few things you're not connected at all. You possibly have, they don't mandate you to sort of build one kind of business. You can build any business you want. They do not mandate you to sort of build it in a certain place. You can build it in California, New York, Like Maddie is one of our co-Thiel Fellows. She was in fashion. So she went to New York and she built her startup there. I came back to India because my heart was here. So I think it didn't matter which location you were in. So it was a combination of being highly accountable. But so I think they were the first ones which really architected work from anywhere in some form. Is at least in my life, I would think.
And what was the syllabus like? Did they teach you market research, supply chain, finance?
Nothing.
Then what did they teach you?
So the fellowship is basically that we give you access to exceptionally smart people.
Okay.
Your job is to go get as much as you can.
So what would your day look like?
So my day would look like that I come back and build my company, but every week I would take a couple of hours. I would reach out to somebody who was building a business in travel, and I would reach out to them and say that how can I build connectivity with third-party suppliers. I would reach out to somebody who was a lawyer in the Thiel community and ask how should I deal with the implications of legalities of what I'm pursuing. So basically the context was that it is more a self-taught program rather than that of an education program, where you have to sort of have a syllabus, have questions and answers. There's nothing like that that exists. The program believes that you're probably the brightest 20 people that they have selected. So if they have to tell you what you should learn, then they probably have not done it right. So they believe that it's your job to find out what are the right things. But there's a lot of programs that are built for within the fellows. So within the fellows, we would have sessions where each one of us would share what we are doing. We would have potluck dinners, which is a concept I learned when I was in the US for the first time. We would go to, is it called Seven Flags or Six Flags? One of these, which is a parks in the US. So I think you'd find we lived in a hacker house together. I was there for 6 months.
Okay.
So being around other fellows helped. So I think it's a lot more of you figure out what works for you rather than that of it's a education program. It's less an education program. It's more a incubation program.
So basically, you're telling me that Peter Thiel basically put 40 smart kids in a room, gave them access to
20 get selected out of the 40 eventually.
Okay, 20 smart kids in a room, gave them a place to stay, gave them money, and gave them access. That's it, and they all learned by themselves.
Yes, and also of course he tracked the results every month.
Wow.
With a team that.
So
that
if there is such a big diversity, if there is so much diversity in the cohort, how can you set KPIs to track?
Everybody, that's the whole point is you have a 2-year goal that you wrote for yourself.
Oh, so that's your own KPIs that you have set for yourself.
You set for yourself.
Wow.
And nobody wants to set an ambition which is little 2 years later, no? Especially when you're 19-year-old.
True.
You want to win the world.
So when you came back from Peter Thiel Fellowship,
Yes.
how did your approach towards Oravel change?
Look, I think by that time, there are two things that had happened. One was this. The second is I had also met various other investors in the Bay Area. I think my perspective of life was that I was building both Oravel and OYO on the sides. My perspective was I wanted to build both. My heart was in OYO. I enjoyed building OYO. But Oravel is what everybody told me was a good business because it was more asset light. And for the lack of a better context, Oravel was more like Airbnb or eBay, and OYO was a lot more like Amazon or a more full stack sort of an approach. But
So just for more clarity, Oravel is basically asset-light model where you're just the aggregator.
Yes.
And OYO is where you wanted to actually have control
Standardization.
over the entire experience of the customer, where you would, in simple words, you would own the hotel and control the customer experience. Is that correct?
yeah, we won't technically own the hotel, but we would own the experience. Yes. So we would put our brand outside. We would do a quality check before the customer comes in. We would put our technology at the reception, things like that.
Okay, okay.
Now, to that extent, like most people wouldn't know that Marriott, Hilton probably don't own any of their hotels anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's true for us also as a brand. But I think coming back to the construct in terms of my approach to the business change, I think that what I learned is an entrepreneur should pursue where they believe they can build a great business rather than where conventional wisdom says that they should pursue a business. And mostly reminding myself of the answer I wrote during the Thiel Fellowship, that entrepreneurs have to be by design contrarian. That is, entrepreneurs by design have to believe in something that the society around them initially is circumspect about whether they can make those ideas can be successful or not. So to that extent, I think I'm not bothered about people sort of doubting new ideas that I come up with. I feel like, well, that's what I do for a living. Some of them fail too, to be honest. But to that extent, I think I believe that it really made me focus on OYO as a singular business that I was going to go pursue. And that's the time I decided to sort of pause out on Oravel. It was a tough time because a lot of people, like a few interns were working with me and a couple of people who had chosen to work with us, to whom I'm most thankful, left the company saying that, well, we don't believe in the idea of OYO, we believe in the idea of Oravel. So it was a tough time, but I think by then I had learned to believe in myself and listen to all ideas, but then make a well-reasoned argument why you believe that you'd like to pursue a business strategy.
Guys, do you understand the business model of Marriott? Marriott doesn't own any of the hotels. Do you want me to elaborate on that? I didn't know that. Okay. So I'll give you quick context, and this is also for the viewers. Marriott does not own all the hotels. So when you go to a Marriott hotel, it's not owned by Marriott. No, that's okay. That's okay. So Marriott doesn't own all the hotels. So when you technically go to a Marriott, you are, yes, technically going to a Marriott, but practically it's not owned by the Marriott group. So what Marriott instead does is, they give them the brand of Marriott and they control the experience of everything but the ownership of the hotel. So Marriott owns close to 1% of the entire properties that they have all across the world. And what they help these hotel owners out with is the expertise that they've gained over the due course of time, which is how many amenities should you have, what kind of training should your staff have, how much staff you should have, what should be the ratios of the staff that you have, what kind of quality checks should you have, what price should you set, at what time, and so on and so forth. So what you do as a Marriott hotel owner is simply give your hotel and let Marriott technically run that entire hotel for you. Eventually, you make money out of it, and then you give out a 5 to 15% share to Marriott. That is how Marriott works. That is how Hilton works, because it helps them stay asset light. At the same time, it helps them control the customer experience. Otherwise, you will just have two extreme business models. The first business model will be where Marriott owns all the hotels. In that case, they'll have to put in a lot of capex. They'll have to borrow a lot. So if something like COVID happens, then they are gone. So at the same time, they'll be able to scale very, very slowly. It will take 200 years to build a brand that is as big as Marriott. Whereas when it comes to the other model, which is completely asset light, the customer experience is not so much in control of the company. So the Marriott model right now, which is the OYO model, is exactly the center where you reap the benefits of both scale as well as quality. Now, is it clear to you guys? Okay.
And what's interesting is that not just Marriott and Hilton. If you look at back home in India, whether it is Taj, whether it is Lemon Tree, they are all also growing their business models, even though Taj does own few of their hotels, including the iconic one in Mumbai. But at the same time, I think at the gateway. But I think that said, the majority of the new growth is coming by management contracts, which is effectively not owning the hotel.
So you came back and then you built this model, which is the OYO model.
That's right.
And then you scaled it.
Yes.
Okay. So when did you raise money first?
So I first raised an angel investment of 30 lakh rupees, which was, call it 6 months before the Thiel Fellowship. And then I raised the first institutional round, was from Lightspeed, which was probably a year after the fellowship. Yeah.
Okay. And what did you do when you first raised money? Not before Thiel Fellowship, but after Thiel Fellowship.
Oh, I think
how much money did you raise, by the way?
So I'll tell you this. So I raised 4 crore rupees.
4 crores?
4 crores. That was the first round.
Okay.
First institutional round, second round that way. I had 2 guest houses then. And for first 5 months, I did nothing with it. The 4 crores was in the bank.
Okay.
It earned a fixed deposit. And our company used to break even plus cash.
Okay.
And life was good. There is a joke, and it's just a joke, that my company was profitable until the venture capitalists came. But let me come back to the more serious topic. Look, for the first few months, we were doing nothing. We were just trying to make sure that the 3 hotels that we were running was doing well, and we were adding probably 1 hotel a month. That much we could grow just by the income we were getting from the previous hotels. And what do you do with that? You bring in a development person, you bring a quality assurance person, you bring in somebody who takes care, or you spend some money in terms of being able to have a customer service call center also. So these are the few things that we invested initially in terms of expenditure for the company. And for the first few months, it did not lose money because you were able to immediately get returns from the hotel coming by. But after a few months, when we saw that the results were good, we said that we will now start opening 15 to 20 hotels a month. That sort of became the new ambition.
Which is after you validated the model.
After we felt like we validated the model, 15 hotels we reached.
So the tech was done, the quality check mechanism was built, and then you knew that this way you could make a profitable business both for the hotel owners as well as for yourself. Okay.
Right, and then we call it the playbook. That when we felt that the playbook was there, which is how many meetings. So how will I meet the owner? How many meetings to close a deal? What percentage should accept the proposal that we make? What should be the sign to live process? What kind of transformation will happen, upgradation of the property? What kind of training will happen for the hotel staff? Once the hotel comes live, what kind of time it will take for the occupancy to grow? What kind of quality checks will happen? This entire process also by time was sort of, initial plan was built. That's when we said we will start opening 20 per month.
Okay.
Right? For that, we needed to forward invest. We had to hire more people, we had to put more technology, put more services, etc. in place. It's called capacity building. To create that kind of capacity, we needed to invest. So that's sort of the first time we started sort of losing money in the first place, which we did for quite a few years. Of course, recently that's changed and now we are generating cash, but I think that went on for quite a few years.
And if you were to place yourself in the segment of the hotel industry, back when you started, which segment were you at? So let's first define the slabs and then see where Oyo was back then. So what are the slabs that we have in the hotel industry?
Yeah. Look, there is no conventional slab, but I will try and sort of make a slab. Okay. I think there is a 1,000 to 3,000 bracket.
Okay.
Which I think is economy. There is a 3,000 to 5,000, which is sort of mid-scale. 5,000 to, let's say, 7 or 8,000 is upper mid-scale. And again, these are not the conventional terms. The conventional terms are far more tighter and far broader, but I'm making it simpler for people to recognize and understand. So I'm making my own.
Okay.
So anyone from the hospitality industry, you should recognize that I know that our learnings are different, but this is just the simpler version. Okay. And let's call it 8 to 9,000 or higher is sort of the more luxury equivalent segment. This is a very loosely put structure. Now, within this, Oyo predominantly initially played in this 1,000 to 3,000 segment.
Okay.
And even today is primarily focused there. But today we do have brands in the 3 to 5 and 5 to 8 K segment as well.
So basically this is India 2 and India 3.
You could say that, yes.
Okay.
I like defining it differently, but...
Okay. How would you define it?
Economy, mid-scale. Okay. Sorry, I was just pulling your leg.
That's okay. Okay, so here you brought out a very important aspect, which is first validate and then scale. And this is something that, Ritesh, I have not been able to see with a lot of companies where, and I don't want to take names, but then I've met a lot of people who do not validate their idea, but they simply just want to scale. They just look at standard KPIs like users, engagement, monthly active users, daily active users, and they just try and focus on the metrics so much that they lose out on the purpose of the app itself, which is utility. They lose out on the purpose of the product itself, which is solving people's problems. And even in our case also, we were just speaking about this. Sponsors pour in more money on Instagram than YouTube because it gives them quick numbers of number of views, number of impressions. Because a reel will obviously get 100k views within an hour. But when it comes to a YouTube video, in some cases, in most cases, in fact, it takes a day or two to get 100k views. In Instagram, you'll get 1 million views in 5 days. Whereas with YouTube, it takes about a month, sometimes 3 months to get 1 million views. But the window of the sponsor and the window of the marketing team is only 1 month. And that is because they fundamentally do not understand how the platform works. And right now, as we speak, while you mentioned first validate and then scale, there are companies out there which are doing this with their marketing, where they're just scaling and then they're hoping that they'll get their idea validated after a certain point in time. So that is something that is very important that I'm taking away, because I've always been in this dilemma that we should scale very fast or we should scale very slow. Okay, and here's where Nikhil often tells me that, take my money and scale, take my money and scale. And I often believe that if I do not have a system to scale, what am I going to scale? So if I just want to work more, then I'll just work more. Why do I need to pump in cash and then work more, right? So this is something that I find very interesting.
So this is an important one. I want to take a pause and just go second layer deeper in this. I think the first bit is, why do founders do it? I think you have to recognize that if you're working in any form, personal, professional, any of those, short-term success does give one a high. And it is very easy to get so excited about that everything else fall behind. And I wouldn't say that I have not been sometimes bitten by that. I've also been bitten by it, right? Like many others. But I think it's the tough times which teach you that keeping sustainable outcomes, which works for the customer and the partners and yourself combined, is what you need to find before you scale rapidly. The reason why investors say that take my money and scale, people often misunderstand that the investors don't care about getting the product market fit. Investors deeply care about it. It's just that they believe that the founders, such as you're doing, will be pragmatic and thoughtful enough that they will not put good money behind bad.
Oh, okay. So you're saying that that's an indication of good faith?
That's an indication of good faith. That the investor thinks that whether you want the money or not. They are offering you because they believe in you, that you will only use it where you deem the best returns can come. So it's very important. Like sometimes what happens is, when entrepreneurs listen to their investors saying, chalo, let's grow and invest, they think that the investor acknowledges and recognizes that we have not fixed our product market fit, and they're absolutely comfortable with it. That's almost never the case. And I'm sorry, I'm an entrepreneur. My job is, I don't see this as scams. So I'm just trying to help entrepreneurs in this perspective that, look, at the end of the day, no investor can force you to spend money, right? Until you're the CEO, you are responsible for making sure the company's resources are best used. So when in 2019 we grew quicker than we should have, I take accountability for it. In the same way, if I'm investing much more measured today than how quick I should be investing, I take accountability for it, right? And that's very important for entrepreneurs and CEOs to appreciate, as my experience.
This is the reason why I admire Nikhil so much. He's told me so many times. That day also I was sitting at his house and he was telling me that, why don't you just scale very fast? And then I gave him a very long reasoning. I was thinking that this guy has built something so big and I am telling him as to why am I not scaling. But he was so respectful about it. He said, yeah, I know what you're doing. You just keep going at it. So, but then, I also would like to point out
because
that
he's a founder, no? He's a founder, and he's a founder who's gone through exactly the same movie you're going through. He didn't raise capital, right? Like he built the business by himself, and what an incredible business he's built. Credit to him and Nitin for building what they've built.
But not everybody is like him, because I've also met investors who just tell me that, what? I can make your business grow by 10x in 10 months. And you are a fool. They said this very diplomatically, but then I got what they were saying. You are a fool that at this level, with the foundation that you have, you're not scaling very fast. And what they also tell me is that if you don't move fast enough, somebody will just come and kill you, or they'll just walk all over you. And this is where I also wanted to ask what Nitin wanted me to ask you. And I asked him, what is the most fascinating thing that you found about Ritesh? And he told me that you should ask Ritesh whether he succeeded. Like, a lot of players were trying to compete in the same space as you, but you are incredibly successful, and other people, I wouldn't call them failures, but they're not as successful as you. Now, there could be two reasons for that. Number one, because you had access to a lot of capital, you simply outpaced them because of capital, or was there something else? And from what you are telling me, I know for a fact that there is much more than just capital.
Yeah. Look, I think, first off, I don't think that we are more successful or others are less. I believe that everybody in our industry is equally successful.
But you are a market leader, right?
We are a little ahead, yes.
You're too modest.
No.
But
I think we have a broad market, and I respect all the other companies in this space. We speak to each other often, and I learn from them all the time, and I'm sure they take away some learnings from our company as well, I hope. So, but coming back to this perspective of what has allowed OYO to gain the scale over the years, if I were to say, I think there are quite a few things, and I will sort of take you through each one of them. The first one is that fundamentally, we were always comfortable with going beyond the top 5 cities. We've always been a over 100 city player. We went to 100 cities like even in our 4th or 5th year itself. And one of our colleagues, Kavi, of course, drove a lot of this effort of scaling our enterprise nationally. So from my perspective, the reason why it helped us is when competition came, they often came to the top 10 or 15 cities. And when they came, now it's debatable, they would say that we start the burn first and we'd say that they started the burn first. But it's, you know, he says, she says. But really whenever, but the burn happened, that's a fact, right? But the burn happened only in 15 cities. We kept making margins from the next 85 cities.
Oh, and a lot of people ignored that?
Most people thought that when we are burning money in top 15, we are also burning money in next 85.
What are you saying?
So we were making lots of money in the next 85.
Okay.
And spending that on top 15. And our competitors had to invest far more money for far lower scale or lesser scale to get to the same market share.
This is so interesting, Ritesh, because yesterday I was speaking to the Meesho team and they told me the exact same thing, which is when all the other e-commerce players were obsessed with tier 1 cities, they went to tier 2 and tier 3 and they are profitable now. Do you know that?
Yeah, of course.
They're profitable at that scale, and that is because of one small insight, which is while the entire world was obsessed with tier 1, they went after tier 2 and tier 3, so did you learn this because you experimented quickly, you learned the valuable lessons quickly and then you applied them, or is it because?
So, two ways, right? I think one is, it is first principles, but I will tell you that I give more credit to a very interesting learning I had in China. I used to read about China and businesses there. So this is the time, around the time when Uber was starting to grow in China, competing with Didi. Most people thought that Didi was spending as much money as Uber competing with them. Didi was in 90% cities that Uber was not there.
Wow.
Right? They were in the same cities as Uber and they had 10x more cities. So they're making a ton of money in all the other cities. And in the 10% cities, they were willing to spend as much as Uber. And that allowed them to gain market leadership. What's the second thing? I'll give you a few of them. The second one is we focus substantially on, very few people know this. OYO did not have a mobile app for 2 years after we opened the company.
Oh, then how were you operating?
We had most bookings through call center. People used to call our call center and make a booking.
Wow.
Right? So we're a traditional hotel company. Right? So our technology was predominantly the merchant technology because we thought of ourselves, we are owning the experience, no? And customers wanted 1000 rupees mein saaf suthra kamra so much that they're willing to call the call center and make a booking. So we launched our mobile product, and when we saw competition was coming, we thought that distribution can be a great competitive advantage. So we launched this, one friend recommends their friend, and transactions come, and we spend almost no money on ATL marketing. We spend most of our marketing on this.
ATL marketing is?
Above the line, basically television, hoardings, things like those. So that sort of gave us massive distribution. Once distribution came, like, you know, it was much harder for anyone else to disrupt us. Of course, competition, everybody was building their own business and they have built good businesses also. The third one is the perspective around what I feel is high quality management leadership. I think management leadership is one of those things that you mentioned earlier, which doesn't scale, but is exceptionally valuable. I think a great quality leadership, great value systems, they would do the right thing no matter what. And I think as a perspective that has allowed all of us to sort of come out through all the highs and lows, because when the tough times come, our people say that we're going to stay along with you, we're not going to not be here. And the last, and I think probably I can go on about so many tactics that we went through. I would say, but the fourth one is that the function of the industry also. The function of the industry is such that if a few hotel owners like you, the word gets around very quickly And if a few hotels don't like you, that word also gets around very quickly. So because we were able to get reasonable amount of hotel owners, like our first hotel owner, Rajesh Yadav ji, he got a first hotel. He told his friend कि yo-yo जब से मैंने attach किया है, my business gone up. In English, whenever he would call us yo-yo, not Oyo. He say, since when I have joined yo-yo, my business has gone up. So many of his friends came, and then they brought their other friends, to the extent that today we have cross-country recommendations. People in Tamil Nadu recommend us owners in Malaysia. People in Malaysia introduce us to owners in Vietnam. People in Vietnam introduce us to owners in US. Like, it's incredible. Like, people in Gujarat introduce us to owners in the US, and the other way around, US owners introduce us to owners in Gujarat. So we find like incredible cross threads over the years that have come by. But I think, long story short, all of these efforts led to results which brought more capital. So you can see capital as the input or capital as the output. You will find very large companies or very large capital infusions many companies have seen in India or globally, who eventually actually don't exist. And you will see companies with far lesser capital being market leaders later. So I think it's, in my view, capital is more an outcome rather than the input, is my sense.
Which is basically Alibaba versus eBay summed up in one line.
Absolutely. So I think the same is true for Alibaba. A lot of people say that Alibaba won against their competition because they got more capital. But reality is, Alibaba also competed with eBay and Amazon when they had far more money than that of Alibaba did. But I think at the end of the day, they executed very well. They got a lot of capital, and then sort of they were the people who had access to capital. So I think, and the same can be told about if you look at the large leading business houses in India. Their success, people say, is because their access to capital, but their access of capital is there because they have built great companies. It's a little bit of cause-causality sort of effect that I think is at play there. But I think quite a few people would say that probably I got lucky. I partly agree with it, but I'll tell you how I got lucky. I feel like I got lucky that I was in Delhi and Kota and interning at a time when India was getting access to internet, internet businesses. So, and similar opportunities will be available for every one of the entrepreneurs. My only suggestion is that there will be knock on the door once or twice of great opportunities. Take it with both hands. Because a lot of times people feel like when the opportunity comes, they debate and think so much about it that the opportunity goes away and it never comes back. So, and I'll give examples of those, right? The Thiel Fellowship. I didn't need to pursue it because I knew there were no other, non-US fellows, non-Asia resident fellows were not there. But I said, I'll give it a try. Kya pata ho jaye. Ab, that is not the only fellowship I applied for. I applied for maybe 7 other fellowships. Because when I learned about the Thiel Fellowship, I applied, जो मुझे मिले fellowship में apply करता था, right? कहीं और नहीं हुआ, Thiel Fellowship में हो गया, right? या फिर कहीं और follow up भी नहीं किया हमने उसके बाद जब Thiel Fellowship हो गया. In terms of capital raise, when Lightspeed was investing, they took almost, they and the other investor came, maybe a quarter of our company, right?
Quarter of your company?
Around that.
Okay.
Right? For 4 crores. It's unheard of in today's day and life. Even then it was not the case, right? But I was very focused on saying that I have to make this company successful. If I have good quality partners, they can help me elevate the quality of thinking, challenges and opportunities. And if it means that I have to give this ownership, I would give it, right? So, and I was very cognizant that I am probably not as qualified as the other person who has come out of 15 years of work experience that I can negotiate कि मुझे 12%. मैं बोला कि मेरा lack of experience, I'll compensate by paying more ownership, right? तो ऐसे कई बार opportunities आती हैं जहाँ पे तो opportunities will be good and bad at the same time. I always feel whether the opportunity is good or bad is relative, my friend. Is it bad? Does it make your life better than where it is today? If it's better, then you pursue it. It may not be absolutely fine. It may mean that you're giving more to the other person. But on an average, if it is making more sense for you and them, you pursue it. You will get to better days also someday.
Makes a lot of sense. And which again brings us to the first aim that you said, having your ears to the ground.
Yes.
Only then you'll be able to spot opportunities and then you'll be able to move ahead. This has been fantastic, Ritesh. Thank you so much for your time. This is time up. I just hate to end this podcast because you have a flight to catch. But then if given a chance, I would go on for another 2 hours because I have another 20 questions left. I'm not even done with half of it.
Sorry about that.
But-
But look, I enjoyed this. I often am in discussions where my ability to respond is probably only for 10 seconds or 20 or 30 seconds. This is one where I can keep going and you don't pause me at all. You let me go, and I think it's a good thing, but it is quite new for me. So thank you so much.
That
for
is
this.
because you've given me a wealth of wisdom. I could actually make notes and I'll actually send it to you.
Please do.
Because
Please
this is pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ritesh. Thank you so much for your time. It really means a lot.
Thanks for having me.